I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zayas Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Arcane Mark. Today we're talking about the hidden cost of tabletop RPG initiative systems. Now, initiative doesn't seem like it's the most obtrusive thing in the world when it comes to battles. You might think that, your spells, your attacks, those are the things that are flashiest. But it honestly has one of the largest impacts on the way that the combat plays out of any of the rules in your entire tabletop RPG. So today we're going to be talking about what the three types of costs to the game. Like, these are things that are sort of drawbacks or negatives that an initiative system can have are possessed by a variety of different initiative systems, either from RPGs or ones that we just make up to use as examples.
Now,
this will help allow you to determine whether or not the game system you're currently playing has an initiative system that is the best for your current group, because some of these trade-offs or drawbacks are not even really a cost depending on your group, the tools that you use, and your specialties, or they're such a low cost that you don't care. And
now,
that's what this episode's about.
Initiative is not a universal one for the concept, though, is it?
It's not always called initiative. We're calling it initiative here, but it could be called initiative, it could be called turn order. It could be called, some of these mechanisms are so free-form that they don't really have the concept as much. But we're using initiative in total as the word for this because it's been used in many different RPGs and is also sort of the lingua franca with D&D using initiative and Pathfinder, of course. So these are all systems that can determine who gets to act next in your game. So, with that said, let's talk about the three different types of costs. So the first cost, and this is the one that's the most obvious, especially if you're playing D&D or Pathfinder, are setup costs. Now, what do I mean by setup cost? A setup cost is a cost at the beginning of each battle or encounter that is incurred due to your initiative system. Usually, it's actually like a mental processing or time cost. It's more similar to those old school, if you played video games back when they were like loading, and there was like a battle screen, and the glass breaking sound, and then you waited a few seconds before the battle actually loaded up. This is a cost that we're going to get into later, like which systems have which cost, but it should be familiar to many people who play D&D or D&D-like games that there definitely are these setup costs.
You may be checking your sheet for a number, you might be rolling some dice, you might be having a conversation, you might be drawing cards. Whatever you're doing something to determine what order people go in and set up a list of the order or what have you.
Even if you're not doing that, it's something that happens at the beginning of every encounter that you're forced to do due to the initiative system that either slows things down, takes mental load, or otherwise can sort of disrupt the flow and tempo of your game. So the next one, and one that can be quite vicious if you incur this type of cost and your group is not specialized in dealing with it, are the within encounter costs. These are situations where your initiative system is causing you to have to spend extra time, do extra math calculations, have a debate or discussion with the rest of your group that could go on for a while in the middle of the encounter, possibly, potentially, every time anything happens. These vary in the gamut. We'll get into more detail about all of these later once we've introduced the three types, but they vary in the gamut from like old school D&D. These take a certain amount of time segments. Once you've said you're going to do it, we'll come back to that point in the initiative where it happens, all the way up to who goes next. It could be anyone, even you again. It's a discussion. These are all the types of things that incur the during encounter costs. Now you might think, well, shouldn't that cover all of the types of costs? The answer is no. There's one third type of cost. These are sort of the
time
meta
costs, or like the mental
time and mental costs.
benefit.
No, those are already in both of those sections.
No, I'm saying those two kind of cover time and mental type costs. But
they also have social costs. There are a lot of types of costs that are in those categories. The third category is the meta cost. This is a cost that is something that doesn't happen when you start the encounter. It doesn't happen during the encounter. It only happens throughout the campaign due to a series of encounters and due to the way the initiative would happen. In a hypothetical scenario where you decided to run a demo of this game and it had one encounter in it and people just played that encounter with your initiative system, in general, you wouldn't see these costs at all in that situation. But over the course of playing your game for a long time, you might see heavy costs in this category as well. So, now that we've described the three different types of costs, I want to point out why we even have included the third type, because the first and the second are pretty obvious. So, in order to avoid having a setup cost, well, the types of things that give you a setup cost are rolling dice at the beginning of the encounter. If you're talking about D&D or Pathfinder initiative, rolling dice, calculating the results, putting them in order from best to worst. All of these things take time.
It could also be like deciding if you're going to act in the fast or slow block.
That's if it's something like Shadow of the Demon Lord or Cosmere, that's more of a throughout the encounter, because every round you need to decide that, but it's definitely a decision that has to be made. Fortunately, I suppose that is actually sort of at the very least part of a solitary decision-making process that's sort of a part of your turn, but you do have to pause every round in those games and wait for to make sure that everyone has decided whether they're ready to act in the fast phase or not. So that definitely is true. Now, when we're talking about those beginning of the encounter costs, to avoid those, you want something that you don't have to do any of that at the beginning of the encounter. Right? That could be because everybody just gets to pick who goes first. It could be because it's already predetermined who goes first based on the rules of the game.
So, like, everybody has an agility stat, and you go in order of your agility stat.
Or your awareness. Now, we'll get back to that everybody goes in the order of your awareness stat later, because of the fact almost no game uses this, where every encounter, your ranger with the highest awareness always acts first. Like the hypothetical rule where the PC with the highest awareness goes first, the monster with the highest awareness goes second, even if it's higher than the PC, you don't compare them. Then the PC with the second highest, then the monster with the second highest, and so on. That hypothetical rule has basically no startup costs. Because if you know that Bob is the ranger, has the highest awareness, and Jill, the thief, has the second highest, you always know. It's like, encounter's begun. Bob, what do you do? And you go right to Bob. So it incurs almost no startup cost. And even if the GM isn't sure which of their monsters has the highest awareness, they can figure that out during Bob's turn.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have a startup
because
cost.
Bob always knows whatever the encounter is, I'm going to be the one that does the first action.
Correct. Now, during encounter cost, which as Linda pointed out, can vary between continual or sometimes round by round, depending on if the encounter is broken up into rounds, where at the beginning of each round for Shadow of the Demon Lord and Cosmere, you have an additional cost about fast or slow phase. These costs tend to be incurred when the initiative system allows you to futz with the ordering. So, for example, Pathfinder has a higher during encounter cost in theory than Dungeons & Dragons 5e, because Dungeons & Dragons 5e does not allow you to delay your initiative. Once you've got the order, even if it's really horrible for you that you're always going right before this other allied party member who you really would want to act before you, to put buffs up on you or to like throw their area effects before you charge in, you're never going to be able to change that. And that helps a lot with the during initiative cost, because you don't have to redo the order, you don't have to recalculate, you don't have to ask, are you coming back in? It has a way lower cost there in exchange for losing that flexibility. Now, some groups don't delay very much in Pathfinder anyway, which means that cost is one that might not be incurred as often. If your group delays all the time, it can be a hefty cost. Now, that's nowhere near the cost of something like older D&D, where with the time segments that you had to add in,
or
older World of Darkness,
where you redetermine initiative every round.
Correct. Older World of Darkness with initiative. every round, and then you have people declare what they're doing in the order from worst initiative to best, because they have to declare ahead of time and people can see what they're doing first. And then you roll back to it again, and there may be extra turns.
And the extra turns might go after. Do the extra turns go during those giant turns, or do you have everybody takes their first turn and then everybody takes their second turn?
Exactly. Those are the sort of technical, mental load, and bandwidth costs that can occur during your encounter because of your initiative. Now, there's also social costs that can occur during the initiative, not because it's like now I'm shunned from high society because of I'm a social outcast, but costs that are like time or people getting aggravated with each other or testy that can be caused by initiative systems such as ones in Fabula Ultima, where it alternates between players, monsters, but it could be any player. There may be multiple people who want to go next.
So every turn you need to discuss and decide who goes.
Or, to make matters far worse than that, in that regard, if your group isn't one that can easily navigate those kind of waters, a system like Dagger Hearts, where literally anyone, including the person who just acted, can go next as many times as they want. And so those can have, for many groups, the social cost of that initiative system can actually be like cripplingly bad for you. But for the right group, it isn't. Just like I didn't mention this before, but when we talk about the startup costs, D&D and Pathfinder don't have the highest startup costs of any tabletop RPG, but they're pretty high because of all those dice rolls and putting things in order.
Yeah.
But if you're using a virtual tabletop, you can have something coded in that the moment you hit encounter, especially in D&D where there are not multiple things you can roll for initiative, you could have it coded in to be like, I've hit encounter. It automatically rolled everyone's initiative and gave me the order within 1 second.
Yeah.
And suddenly that cost is gone for your group compared to one that's playing it at the table. Similarly, if your group is like, I don't know, like literally Critical Role or actors who have trained in improv and are good at passing the spotlight to each other at exactly the right time. You're super skilled at it. You almost never have a dispute over who should go. In fact, everybody is noticing that this person should get the ball passed to them. And it's just like the energy just builds. You always know who it is.
That flexibility can let you tell amazing stories.
That means that you might not have the social cost that many groups would have at that point. That groups might have by being analytical and getting into discussions. Groups might have by even the situation where just like multiple people really want to do the thing next, right? Where the GM is just like, you know, the troll warrior raises his axe and steps forward and demands, "Who will face me?" And then literally there are two fightery people who both would definitely say yes to that. And in Daggerheart, there's no mechanism to determine who that is other than basically who in real life out charismas the other one if they really both want to do it, or who feels guilty and lets the other person do it, because it could be anyone. Whereas for some groups, it's just natural, and they're like, nah, you know what? I feel like Alice hasn't done as much recently, so I've not even saying that out loud. I'm just ceding to Alice, and then you never have those conflicts. So let's get into the third category, though. It's the weirdest category, the meta category. So far, by the way, the hypothetical system where Bob the Ranger has the highest awareness score, that also has almost no cost during combat in encounters, as well as at the beginning. It's super fast.
So why
did no systems use this system, right? This is why we had to include the meta cost. The meta cost throughout many encounters of a system where Bob the Ranger always goes first, then the highest awareness monster, then the Jill's rogue always goes second, or her thief, then the second monster, is that it's incredibly stale. Every single encounter is always...
All right, it's an encounter. Bob is gonna go first. I'm always gonna set up my targeting shot because it's the first encounter, and that as soon as an enemy moves, I'm gonna shoot my targeting shot at them.
Unless it's one of the rare situations where I don't have line for my targeting shot, and then I do this.
And Jill's like, okay, well, I can count on the fact that Bob was going to have done his targeting shot, and therefore there's an enemy with an arrow sticking out of them. So on my first turn, I'm going to go up to whatever the enemy is that has an arrow sticking out of them.
I'll use
Twist the knife, yes.
Which I can only use when someone's been targeted and has an arrow in them.
Yes.
Which I can always do because it's always this.
Unless Bob missed, and then I'll do whatever else. But it's like, okay, I have two choices. Either Bob missed or Bob missed.
Granted. A system like Daggerheart or Fabula Ultima where the PCs have a lot of options, even though Fabula Ultima has more constraints because it's the back and forth, like Lancers, like that too, with PCs then monsters, PCs then monsters. You can have the same issue if the group decides to do that. With their like targeting shot plus twist the knife is very good. Therefore, we will just do that almost every time. But at least theoretically, you don't have to do that every time. Have the people go in that order in the discussion-based ones. The ones that are randomized have the biggest advantage there potentially, other than if you're just a group that naturally doesn't go into a rut in the ones that are like kind of discussion-based, because it forces there to be unexpected orders that can create unexpected chaotic beauty from the randomness of the dice. But is that worth it? Is that worth the cost of long load-up times for your encounter? It might not be for your group.
Especially if it's being, when it's being the thing is that, like, when you're redetermining it every round too, then that adds the other layer of randomness, but that also can create, it definitely takes longer, but it also can create some interesting dynamism in the encounter where you don't know, you can't count on the fact that, yes, well, I know that Alice rolled the highest on initiative, and therefore the order is going to be exactly this, and we can exactly tactically plan for next round based on what's going to happen. We have some more unknown that can make the combat feel more dangerous. And I think that's something that's worth talking about too, is like, to what extent is that turn order system fully transparent to the players in the game? Is it and that's something that isn't always necessarily defined by the system as much as it is by like the way that GMs run it. Even in a system like D&D and Pathfinder, you might have a situation where some GMs say, okay, we've rolled the initiative, here is the order, and then players say, yes, well, I can see that, the bard is after me, but all of the enemies are after the bard, so I might as well wait until after the bard goes to get the bard song up before I go.
Exactly. There's a lot of things like that you have to take into account. Now, by the way, if you are listening to these hidden trade-offs, and I never thought of that, but this is a very bad trade-off, and our group doesn't care about some of these things. Does that mean I have to change my game system? You might be able to just change your initiative. Like, honest to goodness, you could play Pathfinder where you don't roll the d20 and things are just based on the initiative modifier, or even something where it's like first one side's highest, then the next side's highest, then back and forth, and you go back and forth. You could do that.
You could do like monster goes first, then a PC goes.
There are obviously a few effects that futz with the initiative that you just can't use, like the Chrono Skimmer, like archetypes, dedication. But that's fine. Just be like, sorry, we're not doing Chrono Skimmer dedication or we'll replace it with this other thing. You can do that. You can still play the same game that you were playing before and actually change only the initiative if you feel like that is something that's of value to you when it comes to the cost of the initiative.
One thing that I would recommend taking a look at though with it is how you handle clustering.
Yes.
Like, if your system starts with clustering where it's like all the enemies do this, then all the PCs do this, then that may not be as dangerous to interlace them. But if your system starts with like, it's a blend of some characters and some monsters, and then suddenly it goes to all the monsters go first, or even all the monsters go at the same time. You see this with like sometimes when GMs do batch initiative in Pathfinder or D&D, where they say I'm going to roll once for all the enemies, and then all the enemies are going to go in a giant block, and the characters aren't going to have a chance to respond in the middle of that.
Interlacing is usually more fun and feels more fair. Even if it isn't, it feels more fair because it feels like you had a chance to do something.
Yeah.
Whereas if you do it with, that is another type of initiative, right? That's also one that has a low cost at the beginning. It can have some cost during the game of like who goes in exactly what order if that matters, but it's the thing of like, okay, all the PCs go Fire Emblem style, or a lot of those tactical RPGs. All the PCs go, and then all the enemies go. But it can feel very unfair when the enemies just do a whole bunch of things in a row that you can't react to. And since the PCs get to do a bunch of things in the row at the beginning, you often will need to use harder enemies to be able to like be alive and ready to do something at the end of the PCs doing all those things. So it double downs on being bad because either they're easy enough that the PCs have basically gotten such a huge advantage that the encounter is a cakewalk because they all went first.
Yeah.
Or they're hard enough that what they do as a counterattack to the PCs all going first is brutally awful.
Or they're hard only in the way that they have a giant extra cushion of defenses. Which
your game system could be built for, but if you add this to a game system that didn't have it, it won't be.
But I mean, like, then you'd have to go in and be like, okay, you know, I'm gonna double everything's hit points or whatever, and then it's like, well, you know, was that enough? Was it the right amount to counteract the turn?
And that might not help you at all if what the
you.
PCs are doing isn't hit point damage.
Yeah, exactly.
You might have to add in something like the much maligned legendary saves from D&D 5e, and nobody likes having those in the game, not GMs or players. But they're the only way around it if your game system has something that is non-hit point related, like can remove things from the fight, and the PCs are taking that many actions.
And then once you get to the point where you've added enough to counteract that, then it sort of feels like, okay, well, we didn't really go first because you just added a negate our first turn power, and then the enemies actually go first. So like.
Well, and another option is to say that the enemies just do go first. And then you could throw easier enemies because you know they at least all get to go first. But that can just feel very unfair. And like the PCs are always being ambushed and then having to come from behind in some ways.
And especially if there's, like, you know, that they are much more likely to have situations where characters are knocked unconscious before their turn and don't actually get to participate in the combat. And that can be pretty frustrating.
And they never come back in. Or they do, but only because they get healed back in. But then the enemies all go again and knocked unconscious again. And it's just like, am I going to ever get to go? And the answer is no.
Yeah.
Potentially not. Especially if there's a reason that person was being targeted because they're powerful or the enemies want to make sure they don't get to take that turn.
Yeah. And again, that's not to say that systems can't be made with that in mind. It's just that if you're trying to retrofit that onto a system that wasn't made with that in mind is...
Yes, absolutely. It's
not going to be an easy task.
It's definitely something that you want to consider that is a sort of a different kind of cost that happens during the encounter where just like that is an initiative system that is very or turn order system that's very swingy and can wind up feeling extremely unfair because of the combos that it allows each team to perform. Now, another way around it legitimately can be like I say it's the Fire Emblem style, but if you have maps like the Fire Emblem maps where it's like, we are so far away from each other that like nobody can even do anything to anybody else for a while, then that changes things somewhat because it's about, okay, we'll use our first turn to position and decide where the engagements will happen. But we're not actually usually using our first turn to like wipe out everything. Or die trying.
We're using it to gain some kind of tactical advantage.
Right. So, you know, there's ways around it. There's ways you can use that initiative system if you want to use that initiative system. So, as you can see, it's a pretty complex topic, and there's not one right answer to this question, because it depends on how your group is. Especially, it depends on how your group's social dynamics are, and literally... adding one new player can completely change the answer.
Yes.
Usually not for the better. It's very difficult for one new player to make the answer to your question of whether the sort of players decide style initiative is a good choice. Usually there's not going to be one person who's like, now everything is working great, unless it's working better in the terms that they are a strict person who's like kind of in charge of deciding who's going. And that is on its own usually not a great solution, but it could be better than the chaotic mess that you had before, but only going from like worse to bad, which is better than going from bad to worse. Usually the situation might be that you add one person in and your carefully balanced thing where everybody passed to each other gets thrown a kilter a little bit. because they put in someone who's similar enough to the other character that they're always wanting to take
Go
the
at the
same
same
thing,
time, yeah.
or because they just aren't with that same tempo back and forth as much. Not because they're necessarily a bad person at all, just because they don't know you as your group.
And maybe they had a different group that had a different way of handling it. Yeah.
Exactly. So you need to know what tools you're going to be using, what people are going to be in your group, and if you pick an initiative system or turn order system that works for you, I find that people have just a higher satisfaction with combat based on that than any other smaller change, even if it seems more dramatic about like how spellcasting works or about like how weapons work or anything like that, because of the fact that in many tabletop RPGs, almost all of them, most of the time in combat is going to be spent when it's not your turn.
Yes.
And when the turn order and the initiative are sort of playing things out. And so the way that that is structured and controlled is just secretly huge. Even though it's behind the scenes, it doesn't get a splashy thing. Nobody, rarely do people say, is like, yeah, the reason I want to play this RPG is it's an initiative system.
Yeah.
It's turn order system. This is why I'm going to do it. But you actually want to think about that. It's a lot more important than you think.
And the thumbnail for this episode had "Is it my turn" on it, which is another thing that is part of, I would say, that second category of like the in combat cost of like how hard is it to keep track of when am I gonna go. And in some cases,
that's one of the ones that the Daggerheart style excels at, because there is no amount of tracking that needed to be done. If Bob Ranger just went, and the one who went before him was Bob, and the one who went before him was Bob, and the one who went before him was Bob, the one who can go after him could still be Bob.
Yeah.
Or it could be Jill. It could be anyone. Even Fabula Ultima, where you get to pick which person goes, you do still have to remember, have I acted in this sequence of turns? If so, I can't go again. I need to let it be somebody else.
Yeah, and one thing that that those systems where you are deciding more dynamically does have as an advantage is because there is a chance of going sooner. Oftentimes, you're less likely to have that situation where the player spaces out on their phone and is like, "It's not going to be my turn for a while." Oh wait, is it my turn? I guess it's my turn now.
That's correct. That's definitely one of the advantages. Although the disadvantage is. In the one like Fabula Ultima where like it could be you at any time and it has to be you eventually, they probably are the best at keeping you off your phone until you've gone, and then for the rest of that set, maybe the person goes on their phone. Whereas in a Daggerheart style, theoretically, a person could just be on their phone and never get off, and then you realize at the end that they just never acted because the initiative did not. Now there is a variant in Daggerheart where eventually, after everyone acts a certain number of times, you have to have the last person go, which makes it a little closer, but not the same as Fabula Ultima, because Fabula Ultima is back and forth between.
So would you generally recommend? It sounds like you would strongly recommend that variant based on how you've been so far.
I would use that variant. But if your group is very strong improv actors and you just have the flow of things going, then you don't want that variant because you have to track. It adds a cost that you wouldn't have had to pay. A cost that I'm personally very happy to pay in order to just immediately curtail at least some amount of the like the social dynamic situations of it. But if I was with a group where that dynamic was just like so perfect, then I would probably not use the variant in that one. Because it was like, this is perfect. Everything's going right. I don't need this variant. The variant makes it so it would be easier to play the game with more different people that you didn't necessarily know them, or you know them and you know that your group. Like Stephen Glicker, the publisher at Roll for Combat, like he knows his group argues about everything. There's no way that his group could play Daggerheart without devolving into massive like malarkey every time. It was needed to be decided who was going to go. Or maybe the person who's playing the fighter and his Jewel thing right now is very much like goes up front and like takes the spotlight a lot. Maybe he would just act most of the time. I don't know. But those would be like the two options for that. And having that system in place would help with that. But for some groups, it would only be a hindrance because they just have that improv style. It really depends like, if your group is a bunch of people who are more focused on acting than mechanics, in terms of, like, what your strengths are. And that probably means you've learned improv. And if you're very good at improv, you probably will instinctively be good at initiative systems that are more just whoever gets to go, because improv is about doing that with everybody who's in your group. So, basically, find the right initiative system for you. That might mean switching to a different game system than you're playing. It might mean adjusting the game system that you're playing's initiative. And if you do, your group, your players are going to be happier with the game. And if you, especially you should do this if you found that there are people on their phone, there are people sighing that seem to either be bored or a little tense or unhappy with what's happening in the way that the combat is running. 9 times out of 10, a different initiative system might be able to help with
like,
that.
for example, you easily could say, let's re-roll initiative every round in Pathfinder.
You could do that. I really don't recommend it because of that load, that calculation load.
But if you find that, you know, there's a lot of variants that you can do based on what works well for your group.
That's right. So figure it out, and you can make it work. And that is the hidden cost of tabletop RPG initiative systems. If you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe, or even hit join to support us here on Arcane Mark. We're going to vote for our next exciting episode of Arcane Mark.
Our first vote
next Tuesday, when the Kickstarter for Roll for Combat's Year of Mysteries will be up.
Oh, man.
Which actually means we might do a Year of Mysteries
and then suspend
episode,
this. Probably this will be the week after, yes.
Suspend this to be the week after, once we come back from PAX Unplugged.
Indeed.
Okay, so Kojo has a question while we're doing this vote. As an org play GM, how might I implement a different initiative system on PFS games? The answer is you may not.
Do not.
You cannot do that. You're not allowed to implement a different initiative system in your PFS games. You have to use the regular initiative system. So it looks like there's 2 votes for Eldamon Element, which we were also doing one on Saturday. We might be almost done with them if that wins. And there's 1 vote at the beginning from Rex Felis for Dark but Not Too Dark. So I think it is now a 2-1 on Eldamon Element.
Indeed.
But yes, I'm glad you asked too, Kojo.
You can decide for, like, whether you're going to write the whole initiative out where everyone can see right from the beginning, or let people know to begin with when it's their first turn. For orc play, I recommend the write it all out where everyone can see it, because it makes it easier to say, okay, you know, it's this person. Okay, Kyra, it's your turn. Ezrin, you'll be next. Ezrin, it's your turn. You know, Sela, you'll be next. What have you.
100%. All right. So
it looks like we're going to have 2 elements in a row.
I see. Kojo agreed with someone who said they wanted to see all the elements before the Eldamon Kickstarter. Well, that won't be hard, because that Kickstarter is not going to be until 2026.
That is true.
But it does mean we do have to get to them eventually. Now, there are a few that, like, Knights of Last Call already did a really, really long stream on that I was in the chat and talked about things like Life, I think Fire.
Yeah.
So we just have never had those in our vote. But it is possible that if we complete all of the other ones, that, and people are like, well, we want Arcane Mark's playlist to have them all, that we can go back and do those. But for now, the discussion on the life element was, like, so long on the Knights of Last Call stream, and it really went in depth on the strategy of all of the powers, so I recommend that for life. We will do a vote for the other elements in tiny.cc/arcanemark, which is our Discord. So take care, everyone. Have a wonderful week. We will see you on Saturday for Eldamon, and then on Tuesday for also Eldamon. And you can come in whatever order you want. You don't have to roll for initiative.
That's true.